I'm Gabby and I'm a wet on wet oil painter, and today I'm going to be tackling some old pictures that I've done. I have about, I think, 400 flat packaged 16 by 20 pictures that are ready to go. And I did a show recently where I could only take about half of them. So I sorted through them and I took the ones that I liked and left the ones that I didn't. So I decided today to start going through the pile of the ones that were in the don't take with and decide if it was just a matter of, how many I had, or if there were really pictures in there that I wasn't happy with. And I already knew the answer to that. The answer was there were pictures in there that I wasn't happy with. So I pulled out a bunch of pictures, and I am going to do some time lapses through this little exercise and show you guys kind of what I'm starting with and what I end with. And I'll go through a little bit of stuff where I'll not be time lapsing so that I can kind of explain a few things. So let's get started. Picture number one looks like this. And this picture actually to me isn't that bad. Hold on, I'm going to adjust just a second. That way I can just get a little bit closer for you guys. Okay, so the first picture I have on the dock here isn't that bad. I pulled out I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 10 pictures to actually do a little bit of work on. But I look at this picture, it's plain, which is okay. That doesn't bother me. What kind of bothers me about this picture though, and I've already done some work on this, is I've laid more over the top to darken, and I think originally this tree was not here and probably this tree as well. But the grasses I'm not in love with, so I'm going to do a little bit of work with those. There's a few things that you have to do when it comes to working on pictures that have been completely dried, and if you have pictures that are completely dried, it's okay to fix them. First of all, I'm going to have some wetness on this surface, which means I will probably grab just my little paintbrush here and dip it in a little bit of Gamsol paint thinner, which is the paint thinner I recommend. And I'm going to dunk it in there a little bit just to get stuff wet where I need it a little bit wet. And then I'm just going to work on sort of adding a little bit of details to stuff. And then probably back here, although I don't want to add too much detail, I'm going to do a little bit of stuff back here. So if you are going to fix something, I would recommend that you don't lay down linseed oil. It'll take a lot longer to dry. And then if you're going to add stuff, especially if you have, kind of a space constraint for drying stuff, then you want to make the stuff that you add onto it thin so that it can dry fairly fast. Because like I said, I have, I don't know, probably at least 100 pictures that I want to add some stuff to. And even though I have a lot of wall space to sort of pin stuff up, that does run out. So just something to sort of keep in mind. So anyways, I'm going to get started on this and then we'll talk about it when I sort of get finished up with it. This picture for now. Sometimes just adding little bits of stuff is better than sort of kind of going, all crazy on it. And I could add a little bit more bushes in the front. I'll think about it. But I want to talk about sort of the errors that I made in this picture. Now, I painted this picture back in 21, so this was the first year I started painting. So in that time, I've kind of come a long way. Actually, there's something else I'm going to fix in here too. But I'll start from the top. I put a little bit of light on the bottom of this cloud because we know our sunlight's coming from here. And I wanted to have a little bit of light sort of reflecting off the bottom of the clouds. It creates a lot of instant depth to your picture. Also, when you do tree lines, if your tree lines are completely solid one color, it doesn't look very realistic because there's always peaks and shadows, even in groves of trees. And so that's why I added a little bit of brown, some yellows, and some dark blues in there. And then over the top of this, every horizontal line that you guys put in your picture creates depth, every single one of them. So by putting these little bits of white lines this direction, I instantly created depth. Also, here I wanted it to look like it was sort of swooping downhill along with that dark mark in here as though it's kind of sitting back. And so I added that dark blue, darkish blue. It's more of a periwinkle, but you see these lines are going this way, these are going this way. And then I have more coming this way. And by moving your lines sort of different directions, you take away the flatness of the ground. The other thing is, I didn't have a whole lot of light hitting one side of the tree type of deal. So I did that, but you'll notice I did only hit, one side of the tree. And a lot of them, I hit sort of outside of where I had the dark and then came into the dark a little bit. And then on a couple of these, I had it really yellow on one side and then a little bit darker as I worked my way in. And then coming forward, I made sure I gave everything their own sort of shadows. There's kind of shadowy light places, but what I hadn't actually given it, I'd given the ground kind of shadows, but not shadows from the things that were actually on the ground. And then I added just a little bit of long detailed grass. If you're not good with using one of these liner brushes, first of all, my Princeton Aspen is my absolute favorite liner brush. My other ones I like to use are really, really thin manicurist brushes. And I have one, but it's right here actually. See how fine that is? Compared to my nail, it is super, super thin and tiny. This is a manicure brush. This is called Easy Flow Nail Systems, a #1. Nice and long and good. But get one of these. And some of these lines look a little bit sketched out, like they're breaking, and that's because this isn't very wet. This needs to be wet, and your paint needs to be like India ink in order to get that to work. So those are sort of the errors that I made before, not having light hanging there, not having variation, missing the opportunity to put in these different lines, different gradients in the ground, shadowing the sides, giving this stuff a little bit more detail, giving everything shadows. The one last thing that I saw as I was kind of chatting along with you guys that I could do, really simply, and with some good thin paint, is just to highlight the sides of these trunks. And this is something that I have found really, really creates depth in a picture. Making sure that you still have the dark, but hitting, you know, the sides, the little bit of edges of those things with just a little bit of light here and there. And then if you feel like you've kind of covered up a lot of the dark part of that, you can come back through and hit the other side with really dark. And even though that might be difficult to see, when people get up close to it, they're going to see that variation in the trunk, and it makes a big difference. Another thing too that I sort of wanted to cover up is down here, I had some more greenish color in that grass. Now, if it's, you know, just fallen snow, you might get it where the grass is still green. But if this is like midwinter, you're going to have, you know, trees and stuff, your evergreens, they call them evergreens for a reason, they're going to have some green on them, but you're not going to really have that green in that grass. And so I came back with a deep yellow, like a deep cad yellow, one of my favorite colors, and some burnt siennas and stuff, and put in some stuff to sort of cover up a lot of that green. Anyways, guys, that is picture number 1 that I'm working on, and I am going to move on to my next picture. And before I move on, I just wanted to remind you guys, keep the paint thin when you add on if you possibly can, because it will dry a lot faster and it'll make your life easier. Picture number 2 on the dock is a picture of a covered bridge, and it's actually a vertical picture. I'm not sure exactly if I'm going to do much with the sky. I'm not displeased with the sky. There isn't a whole lot going on up there, but there's a lot of little stuff in this picture that I don't like, and I have literally reworked this picture like 3 times. I think mostly when it was still wet, and mostly when I still, not that I'm not still learning, because I am, but back when I was really still learning the ropes in general. So I want to work on kind of doing some stuff on this. I'm going to time lapse through this, and then I'll talk about what I've done. Okay, so I want to talk about kind of the errors that I had in this picture to begin with. A lot of flat color. And even though I've layered over the top of this a couple times, just a lot of flat color. And so I tried to bring in a little bit more darks, a little bit of lights. I did some lining highlights around a few things, and which is sort of counterintuitive, but sometimes, you know, especially on buildings, by putting lines around them, it actually does sort of help them pop out of the picture a little bit. And then on my rocks, I sort of forgot where the sun was coming from, and I didn't do a real good job like working on really shadowing them well, so I added some more shadows. But the biggest part of the problem that I have with this picture is that, you know, my sky is sort of my background, right? This stuff is my middle ground. But I was sort of working at trying to make a middle ground into a foreground without having, I guess, enough differentiation in color and stuff. Which means that, long story short, it just isn't working. And that's why I'm not done with fixing this picture, because what I really need to do is I need to put in some good, sharp foreground. And again, in the sky, I'll show you guys the sky just for a second, okay? That's what the sky looks like the whole way down, which is fine, except it's a bit flat. I could easily throw in a little bit of white here and there just to really show where the light is hitting off the clouds. One thing too, like when you're working on stuff, you want to work from top and work your way down. You want to work from the back and work your way forward. And once you already have a picture there, that can be difficult to do. I did a show on this recently. If you guys haven't seen it, go check it out. I'm working on part 2 of it. And it is called Long Water. And this picture has some seriously long water. And that's a serious problem, especially if you want it to look realistic. So I'm going to now have to figure out how to break up this long water. And I can do that in a few ways. I can do it by, you know, putting horizontal lines in my water. And I can also do it by putting foreground in to, you know, block off some of that water, because it looks like some long water. Yeah. I'm not in love with sort of the shape of some of this stuff, but I'm okay with it. I might come back with a liner brush and just put some grasses that sort of stick out. But what I'm really going to work on right now is I'm going to put some stuff up here that's really big, that's going to sort of push that stuff back, give me some foreground, and sort of balance out my picture a little better. And so I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to start working on that. Okay, so I'm going to change things up for a second. This stuff I put on with a lot of Gamsol, so it's really thin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in front of my blast heater, and I'm going to let it dry a little bit so that I can sort of layer some colors over it. And while it's drying, I will then grab another picture and I will work on another picture. Okay, picture number 3. So this picture's got a whole lot going on with it that I don't like. A fair amount of flat color. I'm not in love with the lines, and this is why I use a blender brush in all my skies now, because I don't like the lines, and I don't know how much of that I'm going to be able to fix. Some of this stuff is a little bit flat. I can do some stuff with the snow and just add some depth. It's got a little bit of depth to it, actually. It's not too bad, but I have 2 huge problems with this picture. Problem number 1 is this disaster of a tree. It's got a lot of short branches, and it doesn't look very realistic, and I can add some different color to it to create some depth. And then I hate the grasses that I have going on in here. So I'm going to address kind of maybe a little bit of the sky, a little bit of this stuff in here, a little bit of the snow, the tree, the grass, and then I guess we will reconvene after I'm done sort of working on that. Okay guys, so I think I'm going to leave this picture at this. Not in love with this picture, I never really have been, but I feel like it looks better than it did. There's a little bit more color variation in the trees. I had a little bit of long water going in this again, even though this is like a trail, it, you know, kind of had that weird kind of long look, and it still looks like it's kind of coming downhill. And it could be a stream or it could be road, whatever, I haven't really decided. But by kind of pulling in the path a little bit further back and then not doing that up front, it helped. I put in the shadows, added to the grasses and made this grass small, this a little bit bigger, and this a little bit bigger. It created a little bit more depth. Added some branches, again, added some color, a little bit of stuff to the clouds. And I think that's about all that I want to do with this picture, except maybe define the sun a little bit, and then yeah, that looks better. So that's it for this picture. And I have 2 more pictures that I'm going to do, so I will grab the next one and we'll move on. Here we are with picture number 4. Now there's a few things that I don't like about this picture, other than it's sort of boring. What's going on with the sky, I don't hate it, but it's kind of a little bit weird, so I think I might add a little bit of cloudish sort of stuff. I don't love that the mountains, especially this one, it looks like a pyramid. They're not horrible mountains though. One thing too that I'm not in love with is the fact that, you know, they look like they're snow-capped to the ground. And I see that mistake a lot people do where they put a lot of snow. You don't necessarily have to frost your mountain with snow, just so you know. I might put in a little bit of tree edge stuff that kind of comes up here, and then I'm going to do a little bit of stuff with this up here, and then I'm going to leave it at that. So I guess I will get started and then we'll talk about it when I'm done. Okay, I think that's about it for this picture. I tried to just add a little bit of something to the sky to make it look not so lopsided and flat. To me, it still kind of looks like it's divided, but it's fine. I left the mountains alone, except I brought some of those clouds over the back mountain and then a little bit less to this one just to kind of push them back, and it kind of did what I wanted. Added some trees up in here. I could probably add some light stuff, especially like along this ridge where the light is going to be hitting. And then just highlight a few of these trees in here. Not taking away from the dark necessarily, but just, you know, giving a little bit of light hitting those trees. Then I added, you know, some grasses up in here. Smooth them out a little bit. They're a little bit sketchy, but that's okay. And then I added, you know, just a little bit of shadowing in here. There again, I could probably take this brush and just dip a little bit of highlights onto that tree. And it rounds it out a little bit. And then obviously I put in this tree up here and did some pretty drastic shadowing with it, which is okay. Actually, so I do this a lot where I will literally color one side of the tree dark, the other side light, so that I'm not covering up, especially if I want a real scraggly looking tree. And then I could come back with that dark and I could come into it a little bit just to sort of blend them together so that they look like they're not, you know, completely one-sided versus the other like the sky. And that's about it. That's what I'm going to do with that picture. So we have one more picture and then we have to go back to that vertical picture with the bridge, and then we'll be done. Now, what has not escaped my notice is the fact that a lot of these that I'm sort of redoing are kind of pinky, and it just kind of happened that way. This just happened to be the ones that I grabbed. Now, if you're ever going through pictures and you're like, you look at one and you're like, I don't like that one, before you start actually doing any kind of work on it, you need to kind of figure out why you don't like it, first of all. And second, you need to come up with a game plan as to how you're going to, you know, get yourself to like that picture. Which is really important, because otherwise you're sort of just wasting your time poking around with a picture when you're like, I don't really know where this is going. Just make sure you know where it's going before you go through and fix stuff. That's kind of my grand advice on that. I'm going to get to work on this one, and then we will talk about it. Alright guys, that is that picture. Let me quick talk about what I've done with it. Didn't touch the sky on this picture, probably could, chose not to. I'll talk about what I did sort of from the back working forward, even though I didn't quite work that way. I did some lines just on those trees. I did some over here and then put some little stuff on top of it just to bring those trees a little bit closer, because they're kind of even on each side of the lake in the back, so they should be about the same height. As for these two disasters of a tree up here, I thought about adding some more branches to this. I think I'm just going to leave it the way it is. What I did is I highlighted the side. A couple things that I did that really popped as soon as I did it, at least in my opinion, was I highlighted the top, the bottom, and the sides of the fence, and it made that jump out. I did a little bit of coloring on the road because I wanted to push those trees a little bit back if I could. And then I gave the trees shadows, and I also gave the fence shadows. And to me, it really made it very much more three-dimensional. And then I took my huge filbert brush that I have that I absolutely love for doing really close up front trees. And I put in 2 really big pine trees just to sort of frame it and to kind of push the eye towards the middle of the picture. And I've definitely painted better pictures in my life, but I don't think it's bad. And I'm actually a lot happier with it now than I was when I started. Like I said, I could, if I wanted to, I could come through and, you know, do a little bit of work. This tree is a bit choppy like the one on the last picture, so I could come through if I wanted to and do some stuff to it. I think I'm just going to leave it. If I do too much to it, it's going to pull it back towards me, and I did want to push it back, like I said. So that's that picture. It did get a little bit wet over here, so this is going to go in front of the dryer right away before it starts running. And speaking of dryer, this picture is now coming down, and we're going to bring our bridge back, and we're going to finish that up. Now, I'm not sure, but I'd say this has been in front of that dryer about half an hour, and it was wet to the point that it wanted to run down. And now this stuff is basically dry. So a lot of Gamsol and some good blasting heat, and you can dry thin stuff fairly quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some stuff to this up in here. I'm going to give it a little bit of life that's lacking. And then hopefully just kind of push the other stuff back, bring this stuff into the foreground, and I guess hope for the best, guys. So here I go. Okay, guys, well, that is painting number 5, sort of, painting number 2/5, and obviously our covered bridge. I'll show you guys a before and an after, a quick flash of each at the end of this. And I do apologize, this will be sped up drastically so that this video doesn't take the 3 hours it took me to actually paint all this stuff. But I wanted to show you guys that, you know, first of all, it's okay to, you know, admit that we make mistakes, admit that our pictures aren't perfect. It's okay to put them down and come back to them days, months, years later and to sort of fix stuff. And don't forget that you need to really step back from your work to get a good look at it so that you can really see, you know, do you like it, do you not like it, and what can be fixed about it. And as you progress as an artist, the things that you can do, first of all, evolve, and how well you can do them. That stuff all changes over time. And the more practice you get, the better you're going to become at something. So, you know, give yourself some grace and, you know, look back at some of that older stuff and, you know, now that it's dried and you haven't looked at it for a while. And if there's, you know, something that stands out to you right away that you're like, hey, I could fix that easily and I could make it look a lot better, then I say go for it. You know, there's really nothing that should hold you back, especially if you have a picture like the series of pictures that I had that I have carried around now for a while. People don't tend to care for them or buy them because I still have them. And so what do you really have to lose? My option was to either take these and, you know, slash the already extremely low price on them and cut the price in half and, you know, sell them for basically what it cost me to paint the pictures. Or I could work on fixing them up a little bit, which is probably what I will do with a lot of them. If I look at them and I think, yes, I can fix something on that, then go for it. If you look at it and you don't see any fixed potential, then, you know, put it to the side. But if you can see some fixed potential in it, fix them up, you know. And if you look at them and you're like, I don't like it, but I don't know what, or I don't know how to fix it, then again, just put it back for a while. Eventually you may look at that, you know, a year or two, whatever down the road and say, Oh, okay. You know what? I could do this with it. And also, ask other people. If you have some old paintings that are, you know, sitting around that you hate and you don't know why you hate them, post them on a page, you know, post them on our wet oil page and, you know, ask for advice on how to fix them up. And then take that advice and do with it what you will. But, you know, sometimes another artist's eye really helps. My brother, for instance, is not artistic really much at all. Although he has painted with me. I made him. He didn't have a choice. He was still able to look at so many of my pieces and be like, yeah, it's just not a great picture. And sometimes he could say, you know, it kind of needs this. And sometimes he really couldn't say. But regardless, just play around with them. Look for obvious stuff like missing shadows, long water, a lot of flat color. Even here, I'm looking at this now, and I feel like I have long water because of this little thing here, because my bushes aren't really getting much bigger. So if I were to take, say, I've been working with like 20 different brushes at least, and so they're kind of all over the place. But let's say I wanted to create a little bit more depth sort of at the end of this thing. I could do it by sort of putting in bigger stuff, you know? Make sure that your depth is continually getting deeper, that your stuff is building in size as it works its way forward. That is super, super important. I'm going to take and highlight just a little bit of something on here. And I might let that dry a little bit and then do a little bit more highlighting. But just by making sure that your stuff back here is smaller than your stuff here, then smaller than here, and you're working your way forward, really will help mitigate so many of those things that kind of throw off a picture. Anyways, can't talk today, guys. Anyways, guys, any questions or comments, put them in the comment section of the video. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. I hope this has been inspiring. I hope if you guys have stuff that's kind of sitting around and collecting unpleasant dust, that you take it out. I hope this kind of inspires you to just kind of move on some of that stuff and improve. And I guess until next time, guys, I really do hope that you guys fall in love with oil painting just as much as I have. Bye now.